So this is one of the foundational course that we'll be discussing Open RAN interoperability. And this is about implementing Open RAN and making it basically modular, no? And that would mean a different vendor would be able to identify, which segment or which modules in which sectors in Open RAN they are good at, and they would be making it a bit more focused in development rather than doing an end-to-end solution for a lot of this RAN deployment. No, they would want to be able to specialize and basically pump out all the resources for R&D, testing, and development for that specific component and be good at that space. Okay. So for this is a discussion, we'll discuss some key principles for interoperability, Open RAN standards, interfaces, end-to-end testing, and list of my references for the course. Let's go with key principles for interoperability. So again, what OpenRAN wants is opening up the protocols, no, and interfaces between these various building blocks from basic components of RANs, the radio, the hardware, and the software. Another feature of OpenRAN is the RAN intelligent controller, which now adds programmability to the radio access network. Typically, in a monolithic deployment, it's going to be controlled by the vendor. And you don't have any much say, on what you could deploy or tweak, on that controller rather than what the developer or the vendor has programmed it to be. While you could request some features, now it might take the vendor some time now to deploy it or even consider it. No? Rather than if you really want a feature now, no, with Open RAN, you could code it yourself, no, and modify the RAN intelligent controller because again it's programmable. There's also a push, no, for mobile operators, no, for an open, intelligent, and virtualized and fully interoperable RAN functions. No? And they want to basically solve here um, the issue, no, with closed vendor, no? Where you have proprietary hardware, you have a closed ecosystem, you are locked in to a single vendor, and on instances that you have a feature, no, that you want, and then vendor B is providing it, but it cannot be integrated into what you have, which is been provided by vendor A, then you're out of luck. Again, you could request those features, but it might take some time if it's even considered at all, no, by your current vendor. Open RAN also, again, since it is modular, it could foster technological innovations for specifically for artificial intelligence and machine learning. We also have continuous integration, continuous deployment for quick development of tools and programs and systems, for your RAN operations. Also have technological innovation focus, for software-defined networks and network functions. And again, with the RAN initially being a monolithic single vendor ecosystem, now being broken down into multiple vendors, you now have supply chain diversity. No? So you will not be locked into a single vendor. And let's say on the off chance that that vendor goes out of business, you'll be left without any support. Now, with Open RAN, you'll have the freedom to choose and plug, whichever vendor suits your need. And this somehow, promotes competition and innovation at every component, of the network stack. Previously, on single vendor deployment, you have competition, but it's on one big system. So it's only the big boys who gets to play with those kinds of deployment. No? Now you could have. And if you have a focus component here, your organization or your team, is developing for it, you could concentrate on that alone. You don't even have to think of the other components and complying with Open RAN standards and interoperability. It is guaranteed to work, with those various components that has been Open RAN compliant. So some sample here on how does interoperability work into history. This is an example in healthcare, where in the early years, 1960s to 70s, doctors had to use fax, phone, and mail to share patient data. Well, it is usable, especially in use of technology back then. No? You could transmit the information faster via phone rather than mail. No, but some huge amount of documents still needs to be sent via mail. It did work, but if you have a toxic case, no, of a patient that you need a lot of information, you're not gonna get the data immediately. It's gonna take some time, and the patient might not need it at all, no, by the time it arrives. No, so when internet, no, and electronic health records came into the picture. This is around 1980s to 2000s. Uh, Digital interoperability was in the talks. How do you do health data exchange with these documents being shared across multiple institutions, no? Be interoperable and be readable. So we got here think from this aspect, the birth of electronic medical records. No? That's in the 2000. Now, with data sharing, no, from 2010s to the current, no, it has become a lot more complex. No? So now it's not just documents you're sharing or patient telemetry. Now we have maybe a 3D scan of a patient or actual operations, no, being transmitted remotely or operated via robotics remotely. No? So interoperability has become essential in a complex healthcare ecosystem. So this enables various organizations to create, prioritize, and act upon vital data for delivering cost-effective quality care. And I think a huge influx now on electronic medical records would have to do with our personal devices, no? That practically tracks our health. No? If you have a smartwatch or even just a phone, you could track the steps in the phones. In smartwatch, you could even check this day and age. No? You could check your heart rates, your blood oxygen level, your temperature, and there is a study to check for blood pressure and sugar. In the near future, we would be able to hopefully, have that kind of feature uh, in our wrist. No? And I would think that would be a very sellable proposition for Filipinos who had a huge percentage of our population with diabetes and heart disease. So for interoperability, this is description on the previous in the 4G RAN. No? We have closed interfaces and proprietary hardware protocols, while in the proposed Open RAN starting January 2019, they have all of these components interoperable, no, with open protocols. So I think a huge driver for the open in Open RAN is actually the open interfaces. So as mentioned in my previous talks, if you have attended, the open in Open RAN does not necessarily mean open source. While I would assume that open source would be a huge contributor to Open RAN, the open means open interfaces, no, and standards. Okay. So in this figure, no, we shows test equipment radio in the Open RAN conformance test specifications. And performance testing, no, however, is significantly different for 5G O-RAN and requires broader set of equipment. For example, for the conformance test setup of an ORU, include vector signal analyzer, a signal source, and an ODU emulator, no, to put plus a test sequencer for automating the hundreds of tests included in this conformance test of seeds. So this is a bit more complicated. Aside from, of course, you're going to be mixing and matching different vendors, no, for your solution, but typically you have system in test, no, being placed right there in the middle, and then either the rest would be emulated or functioning, no, Open RAN or compliant Open RAN modules. So for the course, no, since this is not, I would say this is not much of a technical course for the Open RAN suite of classes, no. We do have a lot of readings. Like this one, we have two readings here initially. Analysis Mason of interoperability, basically case study on satellite communication and if Open RAN would be the answer. This is roughly a year and a half after Open RAN was launched. And next was the importance of interoperability testing for O-RAN validation by a Canadian institution. So this is a good reading to supplement the course. So next we have Open RAN standards. And the standards will basically allows any organizations to create a RAN product that can interoperate, no? Thanks to the industry standard interfaces. And we do have two dominant players here in RAN standardization, in Open RAN. One is the ORAN Alliance, and another is the Telecom Infra Projects. So ORAN Alliance and TIP, lead the alignment on the development of interoperable Open RAN technology, including sharing of information, referencing specification, conducting joint testing, and integration efforts. No? So this open and interoperable standards basically define, no? What interfaces, what API calls, what response are expected, no, between various components. So this enables mobile network operators for the first time to mix and match RAN components from several different vendors. So this is the power of Open RAN, where in the previous generation, you have again a monolithic single vendor deployment where you're locked in, and you can't even update without the vendor's blessing certain modules or components. No, in that case, if that vendor actually supports that feature that you want. So ORAN, as of now, no, they have already created more than 30 specifications, and many of them defining the interfaces for developers and vendors not to read and, well, basically comply. Because if you don't um, comply to the open interfaces, no, and the calls and the responses, then likely you will not be able to integrate yourself well within an Open RAN deployment. So they need to have that uh, definition in place before the vendors start deploying and developing this. No? So next we have some discussions, no, on Open RAN standards interfaces. So this is a typical diagram, no, on where is an interface in an Open RAN is located and which components are they talking to. No? So we'll discuss most of this in the next few minutes. So these interfaces are mostly based on 3GPP. We got the open fronthaul interface, you have the A1, O1, and O2, X2 and XN, NG, F1, E1, and E2, some other, but these are, I would say, the main components of interfaces that we'll be discussing. And of course, first, we need the open fronthaul interface. This one connects the open distributed unit and the open radio unit. So this is a major interface for OpenRAN, and it breaks down into management plane, the M plane, and the control user synchronization plane, the CS plane. The control and user aspect basically transfers control signals and users data respectively. And the remaining aspect basically just synchronizes activities between multiple RAN devices. And if we go back to the diagram, you can see that the fronthaul interface is actually here between the red boxes of ODU and ORU. So you got here open fronthaul for CS plane, and then open fronthaul from the M plane or the management plane. So yeah, those frontal interface connects these two major components. Next, we have A1 interface. This enables communication between the two RICs, no? And supports policy management, data transfer, and machine learning management. So this data, no, actually called enrichment information, is specifically designed, no, for assisting um, the model training for the AI and machine learning in the near real-time RIC. So data passes through here would has something to do with AI and ML, programming and tweaking, no, for the near real-time intelligent controller. And if we want to take a look at going back to the diagram, no, where the A1 is, yeah, it's the interface, no, between the non-real-time RIC in the service management organization framework, the non-real-time RIC in the service management organization framework, and the near real-time RIC in the intelligent controller in the Open RAN. So that's where A1 links. So it links basically that two RICs. Next, we have O1 and O2 interface. This connects the service management organization framework to the RAN management elements, no? And this includes, no, the near real-time RIC, the OCU, ODU, ORU, and the Open Evolved Node B, or OENB. Um, the OENB hardware, no, is the hardware aspect of the 4G RAN, and the management orchestration functions are received by the managed elements by the O1 interface, no, and basically the SMO in turn, no, receives data from the managed elements via the O1 interface and for the AI training model. O2 interface now is how SMO, no, communicates with the O cloud. It resides in. Network operators now are connected to the O cloud and can then operate, no, and maintain the network with O1 and O2 interfaces by reconfiguring network elements, no, and updating the system or upgrading the system. They want to use this. So where does this O1 and O2 come into play? Let's go back to our diagram. Let's see here O1, no, from the SMO connecting to the ORU because it's managing that, no? And other components are actually linked, no, to that O1 interface. And you can see on the left side, no, we have O1 interface connecting to Open Evolved Node B going down. And we have O2 on the leftmost, no, connecting to the O cloud, okay, to manage basically the O cloud by the SMO. Next, we have the X2 and XN interface broken up into X2C, it's basically the uh, control unit, and the X2U, the user interfaces, where the former is again it's for control plane and the latter is for the user plane. XN interfaces are also broken into control and user subtypes. No? So I got the XN-E and XN-U. Both were originally designed by 3GPP to send information between the 4G networks evolved node Bs or between an evolved node Bs and a 5G networks. No? In ORAN Alliance documentation, the interface has the same principles, no, and protocols. So again, this is based on 3GPP. In the diagram, no, both of the X2 interfaces enters from outside the architecture, showing they are incoming from another deployment. No? And let's see that back into the diagram. Yep. So you can see here the X interfaces, no, coming from the rightmost, going into the ORAN deployment. Next, we have the next gen interface or NG interface, control unit and user plane interfaces that connects, no, to OCU control plane and OCU user plane, no, to the 5G core network. Okay. Control plane information goes to the 5G access and mobility management function, or we call AMF, which receives connection and session information from the user equipment, or for layman's terms, this is typically our cellular devices. User plane information goes to the 5G user plane function, UPF, which handles many aspects of routing, forwarding, and tunneling data or voice. No? But nowadays, it's really voice is handled via data anyway. No? So this is going to be just most likely IP network. No? I'll be discussing here in the NG interfaces. Okay. And where is it in the diagram? Again, coming from the outside. No? It's gonna, if you take a look at the rightmost, you got the NGU, and then below it, it's going to be the NGC interfaces. For the F1 interface, this is broken down into um, control and user planes too, no, subtypes. So you got connections for the OCU-CP and the OCU-P to the ODU. This exchange data about the frequency resource sharing and other network statuses, especially in the radio units. No? One OCU can accommodate multiple ODU via the F1 interface, so you could multiplex and you could manage, no, a lot of ODUs via the F1 interface. And to check them on the diagram, this is going to be the F1. No? The ODU coming up to the yellow boxes of the OCU-CP and the OCU-UP. So that's where the F1 interfaces are connected to. And then lastly, we have E1 and E2 interfaces. This connects to disaggregated OCU, user and control planes, no? And transfers configuration data and capacity information between the two OCU planes. Again, this is also one of the last, no, 3GPP-based interfaces, and basically connects to this aggregated OCU. And you could think of this as a heartbeat synchronization interface, no, for two ODUs to work with the same data sets. Or in the event that one OCU goes down, no, maybe the other OCU is programmed to be able to take care of that lost OCU, no, and service the other clients in the radio access network. No? So to check where the E1 and E2 interfaces are, yeah, you could see here, the E2 interfaces at least, no, could be seen here in green with the near real-time runtime controller connecting to OA and B, ODU, OCU UP, and OCU CP. Okay. E1 interfaces are basically linked between OCU CP and OCU UP. So that's how they're managed. Okay. So next we have Open RAN, end-to-end testing. This for a bit. Okay. So this one, it was released, no? At least the current version where I'm using is release 2022, version 4.0, and it came from the Open RAN Test and Integration Focus Group that does end-to-end test specification for us to have some sort of documentation on what to test, how to test, and what's specific system under test. So system under test is a specific component of an Open RAN that you want to basically have a feel, no, if it actually works. Um, because well, the first thing that we want to figure out, no, is it compliant with the Open RAN APIs and interfaces? So that's one. And after that, we want to do performance testing. So it might be talking, at least that's the first step, but its performance might not be up par as to what we need, no, in our radio access network, especially now that we have high density um, cellular sites, no, where it needs to service, no, a lot of end user device, and this end user device are consuming, no, a lot of bandwidth, no, for their uses, no, like even a simple voice call, from a simple voice call to streaming, no, video content, no, via mobile data network. So here's an example of an Open RAN test. So as I made a security guy, I made this. I saw this example, and this is a good use case, no, for how does interoperability testing document look like. So this came from that document, and this one is they are requiring, no, that I want to be able to test the A1 interface for blind exploitation of well-known vulnerabilities and attempt, no, to do a vulnerability scan, execute it blindly. No, it's not necessarily gonna compromise the system under test because it's most likely gonna get patched. No, but they are hoping that the system would react and defend itself, and even though on the instance that it's not able to defend itself, it's not gonna cause degradation. So that's a test description at least. No? For the test setup and configuration, you require that the test requires easy access to the IP address of the near real-time RICS A1 interface. So the attacker will already be inside the RAN network, and it's gonna perform a vulnerability scan for the A1 interface with the near real-time RIC. No? So it's going inside the RAN component. This is a zoom up view of the graphics where you got supposedly an emulated threat actor attacking the A1 interface from SMO to the real-time RIC and bombarding it with malicious traffic and ensuring that the near real-time RIC, no, will not be degraded, or at least degraded in an acceptable manner the moment that the attack is happening. So test procedure here in the network layer sample is you're gonna ensure that the user and devices are contained, no, with the user specific plane traffic, and it could be handled by the system under test. No? Again, while the attack is going on, the UEs must not feel, no, any service degradation or no outage at that for that matter. You would have a vulnerability scanning tool that has up-to-date vulnerability database and signatures, and you're gonna do the scan from there. Typically could use vulnerability scanners here like Qualys and Nessus, no, to run and hit the near real-time interface. Sorry, near real-time RIC with the A1 interface. With at least they also define the following settings, no? Where the TCP port should be scanned. No? All ports 0 to 65,535. UDP would only be top 1,000 because scanning UDP tends to be slow. So we don't want to hog up the resource not to scan and might take you a day or two. No? You just want the result. If there will be signal degradation. Safe checks, that means no holds barred. Various vulnerability scan traffic that could cause outage would still be sent out by the wire. No? So again, this is in a test environment anyway, and you want to know, no, if that kind of traffic would affect your system under test. And while this is scanning and running, no, for the duration of the test, you observe the functional and performance impact of this test on the SUT. So the expected results, no meaningful degradation of service while the attack is going on in the SUT. And you need to also recommend it to use section 5.6 of this documentation for bidirectional throughput in different radio components. Again, you typically would perform a data transfer test, no, and then check the graph, no, if there's any noticeable signal degradation. No? But so far, um, this is a good example of how the end-to-end testing document was defined. And just a short note here, no disclaimer that it's not really the goal of this specific test to identify known vulnerabilities of under the A1 interface. They just want to find out if I bombard you with a lot of attack traffic, you would still be able to held out your end of the components, and your performance will not be degraded by that much. So lastly, well, you want to test this, no? So if you want to deploy a lab, there are sample testing platforms here in the next sections that we have researched, and we have determined that this is uh, one of the best, if not the best, testing platforms, no? This one, most likely you will be a telco if you would go with the VIAVI solutions, no? They have various end-to-end testing platforms, no? From emulated to lab to field. They could test interoperability, they could test performance, capacity, and even troubleshooting. No? If you have a component that seems to be wonky, plug it here, check if it works with other components well, and troubleshoot if it is the problem or is it the module connecting to it that's the problem. And then if that's the case, no, you could replace it and check out with other components if it does talk. Well, the problem again that I was expecting that it's going to be interoperable, we might experience the same thing, no, with various vendors claiming to be Open RAN compliant, no, even though they were tested, there might be some weird use case where they will not actually operate as intended. So you want to test all of those scenarios here in a lab environment rather than having to figure out that it doesn't work well with specific use case while it's in production. So this would be a good way to test it. No? But again, this is one of the best solutions for anything under the sun that you want tested in Open RAN. But for, let's say, a small lab environment or educational institution, might want to take a look at Firecell. No? So for Firecell, they have a 4G, 5G lab kit under 11, maybe 12,000 euros. No? Looks expensive, no? But it's a software-defined network, and they already provide you with smartphones and SIM cards, and it's practically a small telco, no? That you could operate and do your development and testing here. So that is actually a bargain for that cost. And for the specs, no? Yeah, it could support various frequencies, no? With 4G and 5G too. And you could easily see, no, that if you're using 4G, it could support a maximum of 16 user and devices. If you're using 5G, of course, with the bandwidth requirements and the more um, complex it is, no, it could only support 10 devices. But for a small lab environment, it should be good, especially with up to 70 Mbps on 4G and 100 Mbps on 5G bitrate. Now with 30 milliseconds that latency. So this is actually a good platform for learning, no, for Open. So this is a short course. That is the last slide, no, for the lecture. So we have here key learning points that summarizes the current discussion, no, from key to interoperability is opening up of the protocol interfaces. We got Open RAN standards to include work on network controllers, management and orchestration frameworks, and the interface that connects all the network elements in the RAN infrastructure, and a lot more.